Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us on our very first episode of Human in the Hard Drive. I think we have a pretty interesting concept here, but we'll see how it goes. Um, the idea behind this podcast is to discuss the tech industry from the human side of things. So there's a lot of podcasts that delve deep into technical concepts, which very well could happen in the future if that's what the interest is. But what we are looking to do is explore the other side of the tech industry, the human side. So the idea is to get into topics like transitioning careers, imposter syndrome, can coworkers be friends too, how to move up in the corporate world, what it's like starting your own business, balancing work and family life, and basically anything else that listeners might suggest or want to hear about. Eventually, we will be welcoming some guests to join us on a variety of topics. I hope anybody listening is able to take something that we have experienced and use it to better their lives or their careers. And I hope the same for the three of us, honestly, because I don't really know what these guys have been up to professionally for the last 18 years or so. Um, this episode is going to be mostly about us and where we've come from and what we do day to day in our roles. So, to introduce ourselves, we have Brian. He is a software developer for a medical software company. Jim, who is running his own web development business. And I'm Jason, or Jay, as you'll probably hear me referred to as most of the time. And I'm an AWS cloud consultant. The three of us have known each other since we were about 4 years old. We all grew up in the same small town in Massachusetts and have been friends for the last 30 years or so. We all graduated from the same or from high school at the same time and all went off to different colleges. Our journeys into technology has been very different. So let's get started with some stories about how we went from college to where we are today. So, Brian, I'll have you start us off. Can you summarize what you've been up to since we graduated high school 18 years ago?
I can try to do that. So I'm Brian. My tech journey, I guess, or my interest in tech started in my junior year in high school. Jim and I took a class together called Digital Electronics. From there, it kind of sparked my interest in just engineering and coding. And so I went to Western New England College for electrical engineering with a concentration on computer science. Um, College was, fun to start in freshman year, so I didn't do the best. But then I met my wife sophomore year, straightened me out, and I graduated with a bachelor's in electrical engineering. From there, my first job out of college was a programming job for a medical software company, and I have been there ever since. My company creates and develops their own languages, so I have been in my own super hyper specific world in terms of tech and coding. I have been using their languages for most of my tech career. So whenever I hear about Jim and Jason and all their different ventures and everything else, it's much different than what my world has been in the tech. Um, so I have two kids. I have a boy who's 5 and a girl that's 3. And they keep me very busy, so I'm, constantly juggling uh, family life and my career, which can be taxing. um, and let's see, anything else that's interesting about me? Not too much. I'm actually I'm very shy and quiet person, so podcasting is going to be a new venture for me. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, Jim, you take over for me.
Sure. Yeah. It's funny, Bri, hearing you talk about like how, you see the stuff that Jay and I do and how it's interesting and seems like very foreign to you because I know for a fact that the stuff you're doing is definitely harder than what I'm doing. So it's just funny because I would definitely be interested in like understanding like more like the stuff that your company does. Obviously, it's not public, so it's not something you could share, but it's so fascinating to
Right.
see other technologies being done in a completely different way. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got my tech start. Well, it's funny. I never was that interested in computers as a kid. Like I was actually kind of scared of them. My brother was super into computers from a very young age. I would always kind of play around with his computer. Actually, I think Brian, you were at my house one time when we messed up his computer and like
Oh, yeah.
it looked like we deleted everything, and I was just like terrified. So I was just never really drawn to it, to be honest. I did take that course with you in high school, digital electronics, which sparked a lot of interest. Like I thought I had a lot of fun in that course. I remember I programmed Cinnamon Girl by Neil Young on like a little device that beeped it out. Like it was kind of cool. And Jay, I know we had talked in the
Awesome.
past that we took an HTML course as well. Again, like it was
Mhm.
fun, but it was fun in the way that I felt like I was getting out of other stuff that was really boring. I don't know if I was like, oh, I want to do websites or anything like that. Um, and I also remember being really confused about how HTML could translate into a visual thing on the screen. And like, I honestly, I think I was confused about that for like even the start of my career in that field. It's just like, I didn't really understand that process. I maybe I understand a little better now, but yeah, that was very confusing to me. I bopped around in college. I actually transferred a few different times. So I went to three different schools altogether. Ended up settling on a business degree, which I don't recommend if you're a kid and you want to go into school for business. Just like skip it. Just start a business is my opinion. Jay,
I
do you
will
disagree?
say though, having a business degree in tech is not necessarily a bad thing if you're trying to, sort of look towards that sort of position. So, I mean,
Yeah,
say what you will, but yeah, I feel like it's not necessarily a bad thing to have.
yeah, and that's actually a good point. So my career path has I have my own little consulting business. So my degree doesn't help me in my day to day, but if you're going to be hired at a company or especially if you have C-level like trajectory in mind, then I think degrees like business degrees can be super helpful, especially if they're from one of the big business schools. So it really depends on what you're trying to do. In my case, it was essentially useless, honestly. Like I learned some fundamental accounting stuff, but I learned in my first month at my first job out of school, I learned more than I learned in 4 years at a business school. So skip it if you're gonna start your own business. I think take your money, like invest that money into your business and just skip it. But anyways, out of school, I my degree did get me a job at a company that was in the data storage industry. They were a sales company essentially for big NAS manufacturers like Dell. And at that company, I was doing operations, but I could do some technical things, like I was doing SQL reporting for sales reports, which was kind of fun. And that was my first also intro into seeing tech people that basically seemed like they were having a way better time than anyone else at the company. So, they'd show up in flip flops at noon when we all just show up at kind of in business casual, strictly at 9 a.m. And if you're a minute late, then you're kind of in trouble. So I just was interested in the lifestyle more than anything at the time. So I started studying a little bit online. There's a bunch of free courses at the time. This was probably around 2012, something like 13. I don't know. 2012 because I got my first tech job in 2013, I think. So yeah, I was basically studying on like Coursera and edX and all those different courses. They were all free at the time. Now everything's paid for. I learned some basic Python, and eventually, I tried to transition to a different role at that company. It didn't pan out, so I ended up just getting a job at a small startup that took a chance on a junior person who didn't really know a bunch. I learned a lot at that agency. We basically were doing websites, Drupal websites. I did that for a few years, and eventually I decided to start my own company doing similar things. And I've been doing that for a while. I've changed technologies a bunch. I'm really obsessed with the idea of simplicity at this point. Most of my projects are they're not Fortune 500 company level scale. They're really small projects, and so I'm going back to basics. I realize that the whole tech industry is kind of following Google and Amazon and these people who are building things at a scale that most of us have no, like, it has no bearing on anything that we're doing at all. So I'm trying to like completely X that out and kind of cut out the cruft as much as possible and focus on some different technologies. Like Go is really interesting to me. I really like Svelte a lot, but I hate the JavaScript ecosystem. And HTMX is kind of interesting. So there's a lot of technologies that I think are kind of following that paradigm that I'm trying to dig into more these days. SQLite's obviously another staple in my workflow. But yeah, that's me. I live here with my wife Stephanie. She's helped me since the beginning of my business. And yeah, I mean, I spend way too much time on my business and doing tech. It's kind of consumed my life. I think like anybody who's been in the industry for a decade, you almost fantasize about getting out of it. At least I do. So I don't know. Tech is like a love hate thing for me.
Yeah, no, I feel that one for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you.
Oh, sorry, Jay. I'm done.
Okay. Yeah. So, for me, after I graduated high school, um, I left home to study at UMass Dartmouth and majored in physics. Got some really cool experiences there. For example, I got chosen by one of my professors to spend a summer in Sweden working at a particle accelerator, which I feel like, most people don't really get to say for themselves. So that was pretty cool. After I graduated, I started right back into grad school for nuclear physics. Um, but after a semester or so, I realized that my heart really wasn't in it. And it was also super expensive. So I decided to drop out. I got my first job at the same software company that Brian still works for, working at working as a technical support specialist, which was mostly code delivery for applications purchased by their clients. And there was also a little bit of programming involved in that as well. I was there for about 3.5 years before starting a new role at a managed service provider, working in help desk support. Again, like Jim, when I started, I had zero experience in anything that I was doing. So, troubleshooting computer issues or networking issues or what was going on servers. I remember one of the first tickets that I got was like, I can't log into my computer. And there was no, basically, the issue was the computer wasn't attached to a domain. And I didn't have any idea what the difference was between like a personal computer login and a domain user login. So, yeah, that was really interesting. But yeah, so I was there for 3 years. And then my wife and I decided to move to Australia. So, unfortunately, I had to leave that role. I say unfortunately because to this day, I still think my boss there was probably the best I ever had. Um, Upon arriving in Australia, I bounced around for a bunch of different tech roles before I decided to finally get into cloud computing. I studied for a certificate offered by AWS and secured my first cloud role at one of the big four consulting firms. I was there for almost a year and a half before taking a new contract role for a consulting company in Sydney, which brings me basically to today. I just finished up that role a couple of weeks ago, so I'm currently on the lookout for the next one. Um, but yeah, so it's interesting to me that tech is so diverse and there are so many different types of roles that you can have within the tech space. You both are in such a different space than I am, and I'm really curious to what your days typically look like because I'm sure they're probably very different from mine. Brian, what could you walk us through what a day in the life of a software developer is like?
I can. Yeah, I do think our days are probably a lot different between the three of us. So, um, I'm I'm currently full remote. I work from home. I go in about once a month to our buildings, which just like probably most tech companies, things change every 6 months. So upper management's still trying to figure all that out. But I very rarely go in, and I enjoy that. So what I do is my ideal day is, I have no meetings and I code all day, but that's not reality. And I have lots of meetings and I code in between. My group, so I have 3 to 4 applications that not I'm in charge of, but I work on underneath my manager. And my manager has about 10 different developers that work on both bugs that come in along with enhancements that further our applications. Either you know, there's industry standards that we have to meet, and then there's also things that the customer needs or wants that we take care of. So that's what I actively code on. Yes, Jason?
Yeah, I was just wondering, as a developer in the medical software industry, do you find yourself interfacing with clients very often, or is that something that you have to do pretty rarely?
So my my teams don't nearly as much as support staff do under my company. There are I so I this past 2 years I worked on a brand new from the floor up application, and we did meet with the customers. Um, we had four different customers that we met with on a weekly basis. So I was on four meetings during the week with four different customers. So in that sense, I was, but that was kind of a unique project that we were working on. So now that I'm off of that, I haven't talked to a customer in about a year now. So it changes for what I'm working on basically. So, but yeah,
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 just another question based off of that first question. How much say do you have in like the design of something that the customer wants? Is it basically they talk to somebody else at the business and they tell them whether or not like they can do this and then they have you do it? Or is it um, you get something from someone else in the business who's saying we have a client requesting this. Can you design something like this that will work for them?
yeah. So our we have designers that actively work with the customers to try to figure things out, and they also have to meet industry standards and everything else. But at the same time, we have so like for instance, some of my meetings that we're talking about, we do have like once a week we have a design review where everyone underneath our manager meets and we talk about like high pressure points that it's good to get everybody's eyes on and everyone's opinion. So yes, I do design things in some sense, but at the end of the day, it is up to the designers. But they do take our design our designers that are underneath my manager are very good at listening to everybody and taking our point of view from the technical perspective and their point of view from a user's perspective and blending it very well together. So um, it's both, I guess.
Okay, cool.
um,
I'll try not to interrupt you. Okay.
no, no, all good. So yeah, some of my meetings, everyone has like, well, I don't know if you guys do, but we have Scrum calls on the daily where we talk about what we're doing. The one meeting that I think that I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit in terms of I think it's beneficial that for me as a coder, and I think other companies could use it, is a group code review where if we have a project that we're working on, the coder has to go through the purpose of the story and everything else. And then they go through all the code, and it makes the coder very, it doesn't allow them to be lazy because you have to tell 10 of your peers like this is why I did this, and then they're going to have their own opinions on, if that's the right way to do it or if you did something wrong. And you also have experts or really good experienced coders that can point out things to you that um, you know they've come across in the past where if you don't have that whole group together looking at something, you don't there's the opportunity for things to fall through the cracks more. So it's I find it very beneficial. Jason, you look like you're
Yeah, I'm
uncertain
just
about it.
wondering, like, is that like a stressful? I mean, like, so you've been with this company for like 13 years now, or you know the code and the applications inside and out and stuff like that. But like,
Yeah.
do you think to somebody starting there that might be like a very high pressure sort of situation?
I am glad that my group instituted this whenever I was 10 years into the company compared to my first 3 years. Yes. I agree. I do think for the younger guys, it is probably, but it also, nobody goes into it being like, what are you doing with this? It's all because we're all going to support the code at the end of the day. So it's a team. So we're trying to make it the best we can, and it gives them the opportunity to hear from all the experienced developers as to why you shouldn't do something or give them praise for doing a great job, and then they
Oh,
get a confidence boost off of it and everything. So
yeah, fair point.
it is hard. I imagine for the younger guys, it's can be intimidating, but yeah, I think it's a really good thing that my group put in.
Are you doing
Um,
a fair amount of refactoring at like during these reviews, Brian, or is it just like are you actually like live refactoring? Like
so
this is a bad pattern, or we don't do this here for whatever reason. You're actually refactoring it with them.
so if someone brings up a valid point or something that needs to be changed, I'll just put it like a comment into the
Mm-hmm.
code, like this needs X, Y, and Z, and then I'll go back later and actually refactor it. But
Oh,
um,
interesting. You'll refactor someone else's
yeah,
code.
no, no, no. If
Oh,
I'm the coder,
gotcha,
if I'm the developer on it,
gotcha.
then I would, yeah.
Cool.
And then if they didn't fully, if on the flip side, if I told somebody, X, Y, and Z, and then they didn't fully understand it during that meeting, then they could reach out and then we could go over it individually together.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's one of my meetings that I think is. So I don't need to go through all of my other. I have my in my notes. I have all my other different meetings that I go through, but
I'd
I don't
unpack
really
that
need to
one
go through
meeting.
all of them.
Sorry, did you say that was weekly, or how often are you doing this?
That one's weekly.
Okay,
Yeah.
and everybody on the team like says this is my. Do you spend a whole day like for person A goes, they show the code, you review it, or like how long is this?
No, it's well, it goes as long as, there's new. So, when a whole project going to a peer review process, there's not like there can be like three or four of them per week, but it takes, an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours at max. And sometimes it takes a half an hour because sometimes stories are super small and easy. We don't do it with every bug
Mm-hmm.
because we one person goes and reviews a bug. We don't put the whole team on a brand new story. But
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, so that's, my day in the life, meetings and code. It's not nothing
I got a couple more
spectacular.
questions if we have time for it, Jay. Is that
Yeah.
can
Yeah,
can
go
I?
for it, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so these stories, your PMs, project managers are creating the stories, or are you guys as a dev team creating stories? And then are you like assigning point values, like this is or hours like estimates before you dive into it? Is there like a general like kind of like we think this is the amount, and then everyone has a certain pace that they keep throughout? Are you keeping track of those metrics?
So I got loaned to a group, it's the same company, but I got loaned to a different application for about close to 2 years, where that group did do all those metrics, and it was for coming from my group where we don't keep all those metrics, it was very uh, eye-opening and kind of like, why are we doing all this?
Mm-hmm.
But I do understand why management would want all those things because they do have lots of stories on the pipeline that they want to get down and how much they can cram in with a certain amount of testers, coders, designers, all that. So but for my team, we don't do that nearly as much because I don't know, we just get shit done.
Well, do you feel
No,
like
I
it's
don't
more efficient though? Because I mean, that
know.
stuff is ultimately cruft at the end of the day, right? Like, so cruft can help. Like, if it helps give management insights or it helps you from going off track, like you could say long term it helps, right? But it's obviously more inefficient to do that stuff, right? So, like, do you find on the team that you don't do it, you're getting more done without sacrificing quality, or like which way is better?
Yes, on my group. However, my group, compared to the group that I was a part of, has way more experienced developers in it.
Gotcha.
We have multiple top level, like the highest you can get in the company in terms of your coding status,
Hmm.
whereas the team I was a part of all had younger guys on it. So you needed that, you know, you have this amount of time to get this done, and management's going to be on you to make sure you get it done, like all those type of things.
Hmm.
So
Got
whereas the team that I have been a part of for most of my career, we haven't needed that because we're we get shit done.
it. Yeah, I like it.
I don't know. I don't know how else to put it. You had another question, sorry.
I had one more. I mean, I have a million, but I know we have to move things on at some point. HIPAA training, like what kind of require? I mean, obviously you guys are in healthcare, so I mean, I assume HIPAA is like a thing that you guys are at least like cognizant of. Is that something you guys are doing official
Oh
training
yeah,
for? Is it like what do you do for in that
yeah.
process?
Yeah, yeah. There's lots of internal meetings that you have to be a part of and trained on to make sure you're, you know, you it there's a lot of rules off of, if you have to sign in to a site to uh, help with figuring out what's going on. There are lots of rules on what you can and cannot do. And then there's also, like, I was a part of one of my big projects was sealing patients and all the rules on who can view certain data and all those things. So yeah, there's a lot that our company does to make sure that we're up to date on all of our HIPAA trainings and lots of different other trainings as well. But yeah, there's a lot of those that we have to be a part of. But
Gotcha.
anyways, all right, Jim, tell us about your day.
My day, yeah. So I work on a really small team, so it's me and one other developer full time. So our process, I mean, the way that I approach it, and maybe this is not the best approach, but I basically try to take out any process that I can. I try to to make things as simple and as efficient as possible, at the risk of being too bare bones, if that makes sense. So we do meet every morning just because we were like in the middle of finishing two projects that were kind of high stress. So we meet every morning. We basically plan the priorities for the day, but it's not an official Scrum process. It's not like we have stories or anything like that. We basically have an issue queue with all our issues that we can tie our code to, and then we have like a Kanban or Kanban. I don't know how you pronounce it. We have one of those like swim lane boards that you can basically set priorities and you can move them from like I'm working on this to the next. And essentially, we just try to keep things as like, okay, these are the things that are the top priority. This is what we're going to get done and we're going to work on it. We don't really keep track of tons of metrics along those things, although it's small enough where we have pretty good insight into what each other are working on. So it's like, it's hard to hide because there's two of us and we're also like focusing on similar problem spaces. So we have a general sense of like the workflow of these things. But for the most part during the day, it's kind of chaotic being a tiny agency when especially margins are super thin for small agencies because we don't get the huge budget projects. We get the ones that are like shuffled in a few months and then they're shuffled out. So my days are pretty much spent fielding client requests, honestly, and then I work nights and weekends to do my coding for the most part. I mean, I do code throughout the day, but it's mostly like constant interruption. So 9 to 5 is just like constant hair on fire interruption, calls, emails, all those things. And then the reality is like, and this is why I think it's helpful to be honest about entrepreneurship, at least the way I've experienced it. I'm sure everyone experiences it different, but it's just like, it's the most work that you'll ever do in your life. I would say it's like easily triple the work that I was doing at any other job I was doing. So like, it's just, yeah, my nights and weekends are pretty much spent. I mean, I can't remember the last car ride I've done where I haven't brought my laptop and worked. So like, yeah, I work, it's just like constant, like find time in between the cracks you can to finish the projects. Yeah.
Brian,
Questions?
you go first.
All right, so I'll just say the one time, not the one time, but recently Jim went out on a fishing trip, and it was for his company. And while we were out on the boat, Jim was trying to fix a server issue with one of his clients. And so even while he's supposed to be relaxing on a company retreat,
Yeah.
he's you're still trying to put out fires. So yeah, I can speak to just that small instance of you
Oh,
always having to do work.
yeah. I mean, I mean, I, I worked on my honeymoon. I worked on every family vacation. Like, I can't remember the last time I've done it. I've been on hikes where I've had to like go and try to find service to do it. So it's just kind of,
It worked.
I mean, what's that?
I was going to say, you worked while you were here for my wedding.
Yeah. 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 So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's been less and more stressful times. It's not always horrible. And sometimes it's really bad, but, and also it depends on the person, right? So I'm in an industry that is very time sensitive. It's websites that people, are very sensitive about being up as much as possible. And I also put pressure on myself. Like, I don't have any, like, Brian, you actually do, life critical apps, right? Like, so I don't do that. Most of our websites are, they're not like, I mean, some of our clients get paid, like their business model runs through the website. So it is important, but it's not like nobody dies if it goes down. So some of it's personality. I think I tend to be more of like a high stress person in general. So I think a lot of people could approach this and be like, oh, it's not very hard. So, it's really context dependent too. But yeah, go Jay.
Yeah, basically, what I got from your first 1 minute of talking, would you say that your day to day is mostly focused on like sort of business outreach rather than actually like I guess on the creative side of web development? Because like I know you were running the company by yourself for a long time. So
Yeah.
obviously now that you have someone else working with you, that's probably changed what your day to day looks like. I don't know if you're happy to sort of get into what it was like before and what it's like now.
Yeah. For me, it's been a weird journey. I've like I'm kind of a maybe I'm a bad entrepreneur because I kind of chase cars a little bit. But this is my company was bigger in 2018 to 2019. I actually had I think like five consultants working with me pretty regularly at that point.
Oh, okay.
And so now I have one full time employee, but it's basically me and the other guy I work with, and then Stephanie, my wife, does a lot of design work for us, and then sometimes we'll even hire out like another designer or developer here and there. But we don't really do too much consulting work anymore. So weirdly enough, it was I don't know. It's different. We're doing different technology. We're doing different kinds of projects, and we're shifting our focus a bit. So it's a lot different. In some ways, I don't know. I don't know if it was. I think when the company was bigger, we were a lot more bigger in the sense where we had more projects and we had more consultants. It was a lot more profitable. We were doing something that I found kind of boring, so I was slowly trying to shift it. But it's been different challenges, and obviously having somebody full time is a whole different thing. Instead of being like, I need this task done, is this going to be 5 to 10 hours? Like it's like we just have to like figure out in a different pace, and benefits and those kind of things are expensive, and no, like I don't like the admin side of the business. Like I find that stuff frustrating, and it just feels like it pulls me away from what I actually want to do is like deliver good services and products to our customers.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's different challenges. I don't know. The company's it's for me, it's always been a roller coaster. I never really figured out the business development process where I felt like I was in control. It always felt like the things were happening to us versus us like figuring it out. Thankfully, we've been in business over 8 years, and we've had clients and work that whole time, which is kind of a crazy thing, especially when it feels like every single one of those projects has fallen in our lap through some like twist of fate. Like I don't feel like I controlled any single one of those processes. It's not like I ever sought out and like I'm going to get this project. It was mostly like something would happen, someone would refer us, mostly referrals, and then someone would contact us. I don't think I ever won a single bid that I've put out too many. We spent countless hours doing that, so had very little luck with bids, and mostly just I don't know, luck. I guess I don't know how else to explain it.
Okay, so more sort of back towards the day-to-day stuff. Have you said everything that there is to say there, or can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have like crazy amount more. I mean, obviously I am developing throughout the day. Client meetings, like for a while we were doing like a couple a week. I'm trying to think like admin time. I just kind of sneak in, so it's really chaotic. I don't really have a great process, and maybe that's part of my problem. But like, I just as I basically I have a calendar. I live by my calendar. I used to do all my payroll and remitting forms myself. I use a payroll provider now that saves a lot of headaches. Um, I still have to do a lot of manual stuff like retirement contributions and those type of things that I just live by my calendar essentially. Um, but yeah, I don't know. My day to day is kind of just like putting out basically whatever the most important fire of the day is. That's kind of how it feels. It's like,
Right,
okay,
yeah.
I really got to get that contribution in, like so, like it fits with our accounting system or whatever. It's like there's all those kind of little nuances that I feel like I'm just like, okay, I got to do that today. Or like here's a fun one, like and this is not intentional, but like health insurance, like I constantly late. They don't charge fees. We've had a couple different providers. They never charge any late fees. So we're like, not that we don't have the money. We're just like, I never think of it. It's like one thing I have to log in and like do it manually. So it's just like one of those things like, oh, you're a month late on this. Like, okay, now I should really go do it before they start getting really mad. And then I'll go and I'll pay it and catch up. And I'll do like 2 payments in a row or something like that. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't admit those kind of things, but that's the reality. You find out quick who charges fees and who, like, the government charges you fees for everything. It's horrible. So you pay them on time, but everybody else, like, most of them let it slide.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of peer review process? I guess since that's something that I brought up. Do you have any sort of peer review process between you and your employee?
Yeah, we don't really well, I was intrigued with your statements, Brian, because I read this book called, I think, Joy Inc. or something like that. It's basically, it's a company that they pair every line of code they write. So they pair program. They don't just review. They like pair everything. For us, it'd be kind of hard because we kind of have a division of labor a little bit. I'm doing mostly front end stuff, and the guy I work with does mostly like the back end architecture database stuff. And so like we have a little bit of a division of labor, and like we're such a small team that we're seeing each other's stuff constantly. like, but no, we're
Yeah,
not officially
you're.
doing no. Um,
I guess it.
we have some test coverage, and I mean for the most part we're just like, yeah. I mean we should have a better peer review peer review process. It's hard to figure out. It's hard to justify with how small our stuff is to like have any kind of extra process in the system because I feel like we're already trying to fit like a square peg into a round hole. It feels like because our projects are so small, the budgets are tight, and the timelines are tight that it's like it's hard for us to do it. But yeah, I don't know. We should do something a little more official in that realm. I think.
You don't have to justify it. I'm just curious. That's all. I,
Well,
I,
no,
I,
it's like one of those kind of things.
I,
It's like the thing that you know you shouldn't do, but you're like, I have an analogy. I'm not going to use it because it's not appropriate. But like, there's like things that like you know you're like you should do that, but you know you're not doing it. So yeah,
yeah. There's plenty of things that everyone should do, but they don't do. But yeah, and it's. I'm not saying that you guys should do it. I was just curious if you did have any sort of processes, which it sounds like you already kind of in each other's businesses in terms of coding anyway. So, or like, I know you have a division of labor, but you still see what you guys are doing because you are such a small company. So
yeah,
there is a level of peer review already. It sounds like, but
yeah. It's
it's not an official one like we do.
yeah, it's weird. It's like actually super intimate. So we tie every line of code we write to like an issue. There's like a pretty standard thing, you know, you can tie like commit messages to things. So we tie it, and then we talk about the issues, and we look up, we close them out and like look at them. So there is that aspect to it. But I used to. It's funny when I had all the consultants working for me, I did more peer review because I didn't necessarily trust their code going into the code base. And so like everything was just a feature branch, and then I do like a PR before it'd pull in. I would look at it, I'd run it locally and make sure it all worked. But in some ways, it's weird. The business was bigger. Like we were like significantly bigger at the time. I'd say we were at least double the revenue that I do now, honestly, back then. And it seemed easier. It was just like easier to do it. And now it's just like the velocity is just so high and the margins are lower for whatever reason. I think we're just trying to do a lot. But yeah, it's like it's hard for me now to imagine doing that. Also, I trust the guy I work with a lot more. He's a better coder than I am, so that's nice. So it's kind of like, yeah, I'll review your code, but like it's probably gonna make it worse. So it's you know, I don't know. It's hard for me to like even, but I do see the value in it. Don't get me wrong. I do see the value in getting a second pair of eyes on it. Anyways, Jay, you wanna?
Yeah, so I guess for me, very, very different from the both of you. You're both sort of developers in one way or another. I don't do that at all. I guess I've basically had two careers since I started in tech. So there was my sort of IT career versus my cloud career. So day to day life as a like support technician is basically, like Jim said, putting out fires whenever they pop up. That's literally what your day to day is. But I've been in cloud now for 3 years, and most of the work that you do is project based. So you do get like random little things that pop up. For instance, like I had a company that was just like, oh, we want to clear out all the spaces in our S3 buckets. So I had to write a script that would do that. I had one company who one day was like, oh, we want to move all of our EC2 instances, which are virtual machines to anybody that doesn't know, from one VPC to another. So basically that was creating images from all of the existing machines and then spinning up brand new virtual machines using those images. But that's like, yeah, those requests are mostly few and far between, I would say. So most of the stuff that I do is project based. So this last company that I work for example, they were really interested in seeing if they could move from, sort of a traditional data center to AWS. So I was hired basically to do a proof of concept where they would test two of their biggest apps in the cloud and making sure that one, they were able to actually migrate them, and two, that they actually worked in the cloud. Um, so that was a lot of building infrastructure in AWS and deploying all of the assets that they needed using things like VPCs, subnets, EC2 instances, load balancers, transit gateway, VPNs, all of that sort of fun stuff. Um, and day to day, a lot of that is just knocking out these like individual tasks to advance the project, but it's a lot of client meetings and also a lot of responding to support requests because they have their own software and they have developers that created the software. So if the developers need something, like whether it be a new server, access to a server, anything like that, that's something that I need to provide them at a moment's notice. So yeah, a lot of meetings, a lot of communication um, with clients that you're supporting. Another example project that I worked on was designing a pretty unique backup solution for RDS. RDS, for again those who don't know, is the one of the database offerings that AWS uses. And essentially, what they needed was they wanted their RDS server to create a backup file as a .back file, and then have it transferred to Azure for some requirements that I'm not really aware of. But basically, that was using like Lambda functions with Python, RDS, S3, EC2 to get to create those backup files and have them sent over to Azure where they were eventually stored. The job that I was at previously, before this one, we worked mostly with clients that were using AWS Connect. AWS Connect being um, their sort of call center solution. So you'd have all of these like call flows that were designed for people who are calling in to interact with. And just an example project from my time there was a company that when people were calling in, this was a state government agency, they wanted their users to, or their callers to be able to opt in to sort of like a post call survey to rate their experience on their support. And yeah, basically the client developed a survey with SurveyMonkey, sent me a link, and then I integrated it. I integrated it so that they would receive a text message after their call was over. So they would just receive a message with a link, click on the link, and then they could fill out the survey. I'm just going to jump away for a second because my computer is running out of battery. I'll be right back.
Brian, do you guys host your applications on prem, or do you guys use like a cloud provider? How do you guys?
Um, wait. So we have lots of different clients on different setups, and so we have different models as well in terms of like we have a mass um, offering where we have everything um, in house, and
Mm, they're like
they
your physical
uh,
boxes.
yeah
Oh, nice.
I yeah there's lots of that stuff that I'm it's not my day-to-day job, so I don't pay attention to all of it. I
Hmm.
do need to know some of it for sure, but it's not uh, something that I know off the top of my head. So I have to look into all the different things, offerings that we have. and how we handle old customers that are on like our systems that we developed like before I was even part of the company
Mm-hmm.
and and now. So there's all sorts of different ways that we handle that.
But you're not actually sorry, Jay. Come back to you. This is circling back around. But you don't actually deploy anything, Harv's. It's like you're getting your code up there, and then somebody else is like compiling or getting that out to a server and making sure it's running on the server. You're not touching the server or anything like that.
So I do some of that, but there is a lot of people that are part of the company that are in charge of delivering, which Jason that was part of one of his jobs whenever he first worked for my company was
Mm.
delivering some code and our updates and our new code
Oh, interesting. So
to
Jay, you
sites.
were you were like because those people are hosting it themselves, so you're just making sure that they have like the most recent, like there's like the centralized update that the developer team is doing, and you're making sure it's getting applied to all the clients. Oh, that's cool.
No, actually, so my role was more along the lines of a company, like, I don't know, maybe they would use electronic medical records or nursing software, and they wanted to purchase a new application that the company used. I would deliver that brand new code to those servers. So they didn't have any of it in their current environment.
I did have a question about you've kind of done this role as both like an employee and a consultant. Like, what is the difference? What does it feel any different?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So this most recent role that I had, I would say probably one of the best I've had in Australia, where in the sense that I'm being contracted out to a company who has a client that needs something that they are currently unable to fulfill. So they hire me for a 6 month period. Um, it was really interesting working that way because I was sort of given a lot more freedom to say, because I'm not a solutions architect, right? I've never been a solutions architect, but I have been a cloud engineer. And this was like probably the first time where I've ever been really handed a lot of projects where I've actually been able to um, design the solution for the client's needs, which was really cool. And getting back to sort of the day-to-day stuff, it's a lot of meetings, you know, talking to the client, figuring out what their specific requirements are. Can data be hosted in another country or does it have to stay in the country? How much money can you spend? What sort of security do you need? These are all really important factors to consider. So it was definitely a lot cooler, in my opinion, working for this company because it gave me a lot more freedom. Whereas a company like a Big Four or something like that, everything's a lot more structured. And like from my experience, you're kind of sort of most of the time handed the solution and it's really up to you just to implement it, which is also fine if you're looking for experience, but it's a lot more fun if you actually get to take part in the design aspect of everything.
Yeah, that's cool. So you felt like you were treated more as like the expert in the room versus like the person who's like being tasked to just like implement.
Well, not expert because I was also working alongside of a solutions architect on these projects, but he would definitely be like, "Hey, this client needs this. Can you like work something out and then run it by me?" Sort
Mm-hmm.
of thing. And then
Cool.
um, after that, he'd be like, "Oh yeah, no, that seems reasonable," or "Oh, you may want to like check this out and like look into this avenue as opposed to the one you're going down."
I have one
Um,
more question. I know we're probably close on time here.
yeah.
So what do you think about this trend towards like code as infrastructure? Like I don't like Terraform or these other things because I know like you're like I think like if I have pegged you correctly, you're kind of like I don't want to be a coder. Like I want to be a cloud engineer, and like it feels like those lines are blended more and more. I don't know what your thought is on that.
Yeah, cloud is super interesting when it comes to what you need to know and what you don't need to know. Um, so I might go off on a little tangent here, right? But like, so I come from a traditional IT background, so supporting Windows devices, Windows servers, and networks. Um, but as a cloud engineer, you're supposed to be able to support uh, Windows computers, Windows servers, Linux servers, networking, security, various different types of vendor software that you might use for reporting or anything like that. And then again, as you mentioned, infrastructure as code, where if you come from an AWS background, you're most likely familiar with CloudFormation or SDK. CloudFormation is just basically YAML files that you write, which are super long. And then SDK, which can be written in quite a few popular programming languages, so Python or TypeScript. But then you introduce something like Terraform, which is honestly, in my opinion, probably the best tool for infrastructure as code, just because of the fact that you just have to learn their format for everything, but then you can use it for literally any cloud service that you're using. So you can use it for Google Cloud, AWS, Microsoft. You can even use it for things like VMware and stuff like that if you're still doing on-prem stuff. So super useful, especially if you're in like a multi-cloud environment or any sort of hybrid environment. But yeah, I don't really come from a traditional coding background, so I understand why you might want to use infrastructure as code, just because of the fact like you can write a whole thing, run a check, and if there's errors, it'll let you know, right? So you make sure that you don't provision anything incorrectly. But at the same time, I don't know. I feel like I know what I'm doing, and I can. I just feel like it overcomplicates things because you can really get into this like crazy ecosystem where okay, we're using AWS and we're using Azure, so we're going to use Terraform as our code. But now that our infrastructure is code, but now that we want to use Terraform, now we need to implement DevOps pipelines, and we need we need to make sure the versioning is correct and blah blah blah. All these other things. Like I get it. I get how it's useful, but at the same time, somebody like me, it just seems so much simpler to just tell me to do something and I'll go do it.
Dude, you're okay. So and maybe it is if you have like a really big smart team who's dedicated to this, but like I've seen I've seen Terraform implemented, I've seen other like similar things implemented. You just create a whole new department who's solving the problems that you're creating for yourself. It's like they're like, oh, I don't know what the hell's going on with this pipeline, and they're trying to debug this thing that only exists because they're using these like tools. I find it like super frustrating.
Yeah, honestly, it probably makes sense for really big businesses. But if you're a small business, it probably just makes a lot more sense. Like, depending on what your outlook is, it probably just makes more sense to do everything, as they call it, flick ops, which has
Yeah.
a very negative which has a very negative connotation these days. But yeah, Terraform, I've got nothing bad to say about it. It's a really cool product. I like it a lot, but at the same time, um, if you're learning Terraform, there's probably four or five other products that you need to learn in order to be able to get Terraform working the way that your organization wants Terraform to work.
Yep. And just before I get crucified in the comments or whatever, I know that the summation of this is that Jim is too dumb to do these things. I know that, like, I agree, but like, so is like 80% of people out there. That's my point, right? Like, I am too
Yeah.
dumb, and there are 20% who can do it, but it's probably not you, person in the comments talking crap. You're probably as dumb as I am. I did used to, Jay. I used to provision a bunch of EC2s using Vagrant. So Vagrant has integration with Amazon, and you could spin up new servers. And I had it in my head. This was back in like 2014. This was forever ago, right? So I had in my head that I was gonna build my own little hosting company out of that. And so you could connect like a Route 53 domain to a server, and you could like really spin up these like um, things. I use it for actually. I still use it for all the Drupal sites that I do. So like I'll like Vagrant start SSH into a server. I can reload servers from my command line locally. It's kind of cool. But I feel like that's just like the seedling of what these things have become, right? Like at the time I was like, this is really great. I look back now, I'm like, why did I waste my time on it? I think it's crazy, but uh, I see how people get
So
obsessed with this idea of controlling their architecture through like these little scripts. Here's another thing, and I know people are gonna crap on me for this, but I had a client, not even a client, it was like a prospective client that I was trying to help out for a long time without having any contracts in place. I was just talking to them. They basically had this app that was built by some consultants who, and a lot of consultants will do this. They basically use when a client has no technical ability, it's like a marketing company, the client will just sorry the consultants will just use it as an opportunity to like use it as a technical playground to basically try new things and figure things out and get paid to like just
Yep,
like learn crap, right? So like in
yep,
my opinion that's what's happened. And then the app got passed around to a bunch of people who were doing the same thing. Nobody was actually trying to help the client solve their problems in a simple way, because I would have torn like all of it out and just done a very simple solution for what they had. Anyways, they were using, it was a Laravel app, which is kind of a cool technology. I don't want to make fun of Laravel, but they're using this deployment process for these EC2s that were being provisioned by the Laravel ecosystem has this project called Forge, which is like a deployment, like I think provisioning thing. But anyways, the process was so convoluted. They had this SSL cert that was like expired, which would take like 2 seconds, right? You like go on, you just like let's encrypt or cert bot that thing back into to renew automatically, set up like a cron tab if you need to. Like they don't, you don't even need to do it anymore. They do it automatically for you. But it'd be like so easy to just get on a box, but there was no way to like get at this thing because of all the complication here. So eventually I just had to like go on to Forge's the Forge service, which they weren't even paying for anymore. Like get my SSH key onto that and like sneak my way into this like server to do this really simple task. And it's kind of like, what are we doing here? Like this is such
yeah.
silliness when this thing could just like be done like that. If you just like simplified your architecture, throw it on a $5 digital ocean box, have a little bit of Go code, have a SQLite backend. Sorry, I push this for everything now because I just think it's all just
Sure.
like
Yeah.
craziness. Just like do that. You can do like almost everything with that. Just like simplify your stack. Stop being a hero. Like you're not fooling anybody. Like you don't know what you're. No one knows what
100%.
they're doing. Just keep it
Mhm.
simple. Like I don't know.
Agreed.
I find it crazy. All right,
All right.
every
Well,
week is gonna be me ranting
anyway,
about this.
yeah. Anyway, I think that's probably a pretty good place to wrap up at this point, unless somebody else has anything else to add. Nope.
Nah.
Okay. I guess we'll leave
Yeah,
it there.
I'll say.
So, to everybody that was listening, thank you for tuning in. And I know the three of us are looking forward to the next one. Cheers.
Bye bye.